Hey, everybody, welcome. I'd like to welcome participants to the joint hybrid planning board meeting of August 28th. Take a call to order. Ms. Creighton.
Here.
Ms. Delicio.
Here.
Ms. Foley. Mr. Only.
Here.
Ms. Philbrick.
Here.
And Ms. Kenny won't be joining us, but looks like we have a quorum. I'd like to remind all board members, guest staff to be recognized by the chair if they wish to speak. And I want to just allow everyone to speak. So going forward, I want to stress the need to be recognized going forward, so everyone gets an equal chance to speak. And not just jump in. Thank you. First item on the agenda is receipt of correspondence. Gail has sent in a Town of Wenham notice of decision. I haven't seen that in our packet. Did you?
I asked her for it. I haven't seen it though.
Gail, are you on? Okay, well, I'll get back to her on that. At this time, anybody from the public wish to speak on any item not on the agenda with a limited amount of time? Okay, so this is a limited agenda tonight. What I'd like to do is talk about 3 possible warrant articles to move forward to a special town meeting, if there is one, and have a discussion about them. And I was going to throw this portion of the meeting over to my vice chair, Sarah Creighton, and we'll start with senior housing.
Okay. Is Betsy still on?
Yeah,
Can I just ask a point of
yes.
reference, I guess? So I don't think in our rules and regulations, we have anything like the vice chair, if the chair is present, takes over the meeting, and I'm just trying to figure out where that line was drawn.
As chair, I'm recognizing Sarah to run this part of the meeting. She's intimate with this stuff, so I've asked her to run it.
Okay.
Okay, so there, as Ron said, there are 3 proposed amendments to zoning, at least on the agenda for tonight. So we'll start with senior housing. We had a subcommittee of Chris, Mary, and me, and we were unable to meet prior to tonight. We do have a meeting scheduled right now and posted happily. Thank you, Gail. You're on. For Thursday at 3. Meeting, room to be determined is on the agenda. And room 5, thank you. And what I thought, as I sent in the memo that I put in the meeting packet, that, you know, we've talked about senior housing in several, we've had at least 2, I think, public hearings on it. We've had lengthy conversations. So what I thought might be useful is to step back a moment and just say, what are we trying to achieve here? And then ask the subcommittee when we meet on Thursday to evaluate whether that proposed bylaw meets those goals. And then I know Chris also shared through Ron some proposed ideas for some a change in the language to require five acres for larger developments. But before we talk, even if we don't talk about that tonight, what I thought would be, and we want to keep the meeting tonight short. So my proposal was that we talk a little bit about the goals, and then we can, if we get some agreement on those, it will give us a basis for evaluating things, rather than, as we often tend to do, is just to dive right into the details and forget what it is we're trying to achieve. So hopefully y'all had a moment to think about that, and I suspect Chris did.
I did. In fact, I took.
So let me just, before you jump in,
Okay.
is everyone understand? So I thought what I would do is just like summarize them in very high level on the whiteboard, and then if there are those that are that we can all agree on, then maybe that would help us to reach more agreement. If those that are, lesser, we can kind of parse those out, and then those that perhaps have few proponents, maybe we can say we'll put those off for another time and place. So, okay.
So rather than sharing things on SharePoint, I thought it'd be good just to bring a hard copy
Okay.
to distribute to everybody and we can talk about them.
Is this different than what was posted to SharePoint?
Yeah, these are goals, of what senior housing.
So your goals.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, my goals,
Okay.
I'm sorry, my goal. Yes, okay. My
Well, I
goals,
think that-
let's see if we can make them arguments, right?
Yeah.
Some form of them.
I'm gonna try to summarize these, if this board doesn't fall over. In no particular order. So for people, is anybody watching at home? Is Betsy on?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is provide, why don't you read it, Chris?
Sure, provide a wide range of possible senior housing arrangements to address the comprehensive needs of seniors in Manchester.
Okay.
Second is to require design standards to limit the size and extravagance of senior housing to target seniors in need of appropriate residential settings.
Okay,
The third is to promote a large-scale senior living community in appropriate sites, perhaps in the LCD, and other large parcels of land.
Okay.
To promote smaller clusters of senior housing on sites in more densely populated neighborhoods. And the last, to offer the opportunity for smaller and less expensive units for seniors who wish to downsize.
all right. Anybody else want to share their goals? Ron, okay, I gotta just alternate colors so we can.
Just a place where seniors can age in place and have similar lifestyle. Similar to Chris, have a diversity of housing. As part of our master
That's a
plan.
diversity,
overall,
yeah.
Maybe where they could live maintenance free. Also, I didn't want to just limit our seniors to the LCD. I think that's kind of putting them away from everyone else, just integrated into the town. Be something I would look for. Not keep them isolated.
Okay, great. Anybody else wanna jump in? Mary?
You go first, I think maybe put one more down there.
So, my senior housing bylaw goals would be to have, and you might want, this is gonna be probably a long sentence.
Right.
To have, clear, detailed bylaws per senior housing type. We have one very broad umbrella with very different housing types below it. And I would hope to see one bylaw per housing type because they can be very different. I would say we adopt one housing type at a time to provide both big A and small A affordable senior housing. Provide a small scale of senior housing where residents can downsize. Try to stay away from putting commercial in residential.
Wait a minute, just after big A and small A, what was the next one after that? Sorry,
Small scale,
small scale.
not putting commercial facilities and or commercial components in our current residential districts. I mean, this is getting too far in the weeds, but there's a lot of great examples from different towns, bylaws that go into local preference and percentage of all of housing units, what senior housing should be. So I think it needs to be very detailed and I can fill in, but I guess those are some of the high level basics.
Okay, can you frame these as a goal for the housing, for the zoning to accomplish? So clear rules are a element of the zoning. So big A and small a is a goal, small scale is a goal. Can we frame this as a goal as opposed to something we avoid, but maybe it's
The goal is to have senior housing in residential and then senior housing facilities in the LCD or the general district, or provide more bumpers around the bylaw that has, you need a certain acreage in order to have a certain amount of units.
So can I frame it as large scale with large lots or LCD? That a little bit more specific? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Anything to add
I guess,
or other to vote on?
yeah, well, see, I think of it a little bit different, like goals. I think there's like major categories of senior housing, and I think this is what we're like disagreeing upon. So to me, there's age restricted rentals, there's age restricted ownership, there's independent living, there's continuing care, there's adult health care, there's residential care, there's assisted living, and then there's skilled nursing. So I think we just need to start at high level and stick there. Like, we can't push all of these into one. So me personally, I think a goal is I would like to see ownership, smaller ownership units built. So for me, the bylaw would concentrate on finding some area or redevelopment of any property that was independent, age restricted ownership. I don't think we can tackle all these.
Okay. Independent and age restricted, what is?
So I think there's a few units on Pine Street. As an example,
Okay, so a goal is to redevelop small scale, independent and age restricted.
I think that's where we need to start.
Okay, we're not voting on where, this is just getting everybody's opportunity to say what we want to achieve here. This is, hopefully we can whittle this down to.
I think we can't, I'm sorry, we haven't solved any affordable housing, right, in town. So to say that we're gonna solve and use the master plan as a guiding principle to solve
So
all
we're
of
talking about goals.
I
We're not
understand.
talking about we're not gonna do. Let's try to hear what everybody wants to get done in this bylaw.
So I think we need to start small and something that we actually can achieve and see results. I think saying this out there, we're just throwing
Okay, so
spaghetti at a
achievable.
wall. And we're just seeing what sticks. And I think we should have a goal, one of them that's actually attainable.
Achievable. Yes.
One goal that I think is achievable is I would like to see the zoning bylaw accommodate housing that is walkable for seniors. They can walk into our
Can I put that
downtown
here?
area.
I'm gonna add integrate into town and walkable. Okay. Anything else? right now?
Everything else. is
Okay.
there.
And then I was gonna say that I thought that larger, I'm gonna make it a specific thing, that larger, whatever that large is, over 10 units, some number, larger, have an affordable component, affordable, income restricted, or however that happens in larger units. So that was one thought I had. Larger facilities or.
You don't mean larger by square feet, you mean more units.
Right.
Okay.
Right, you know, greater than a certain number.
So what some towns do, they'll say like 10 or less.
Right.
And
Big A.
then 10 or more, and then you
Yeah.
have different acreage requirements, affordable requirements, all that stuff.
Okay. So
So I get, Ron, if I may. So for me, that word facilities just says commercial development, skilled nursing, that says it to me. So, I mean, larger facilities, I think we need to talk about what we want. Like, I feel like there's two different things when you say that facilities. Like, I don't envision a facility downtown. I think independent living should happen downtown. A large facility, I think the
So,
word facility is.
I think my guess is we actually have agreement on the likelihood of large facilities, whatever, you know, a Brooksby kind of thing
Not that big.
downtown, right? I think there's probably agreement on that. I mean, it's hard to see it, whatever, well, let's say in the general district.
So I have a couple of things to say about this. And, you know, when we say assisted living, we automatically think about
Right.
80 units. That's what they have to do.
Right.
That is not true. They can be as small as 8 to 10 units. What makes them assisted living is, let's say we had an independent living facility, what's happening at the Newport Park right now? Visiting nurses come in and provide services, people get pizza delivered. All these services all happen in a residential facility,
They are, but they're not organized by the community, or
but they're much more efficient when they are organized as a
in
community.
your opinion.
No,
Well,
that's not my opinion.
Let's
Let's go.
stick to goals
Let's
here,
not-
and
Not go, let's have one person talk and then we'll have someone else.
so
And then.
are there any
I
of
wanna
these,
head back and forth.
just to, I'm trying to get, so our committee can measure the bylaw against these. I'm gonna take the, so that we have provided diversity of housing, require design standards. I think that's the same, similar to create rules, right? 1 and 3, 1 and 2, and whether the rule, we may not have agreement on the rules. This is with 2. And 10 and 15 are similar. So there's some sort of thought about having them. Scale seems to be a common thing, so can I combine 4, integrate into the town, maybe a scale, and avoid large commercial and residential districts and small scale. Can I say that's all about scale and that the scale is appropriate to the district? Without being specific about what that is?
Sure. So another point just occurred to me.
Yeah.
Another goal might be to reuse existing buildings.
Oh, yes, that's a really good one.
So Ron, if I may, I think that's a good idea, but I think that it's hard to say to do that and still use it may be hard to say that and still use the district setbacks and requirements and all that type of thing. Because if you're going from a single family to then maybe 12 units, it's gonna bring a different dynamic. So it's not, that's where a lot of these details and charts and everything else need to come into play, that it's not just oops, we've got a single family, now we can switch it to a 12 unit. It's not that easy.
Well, setbacks would require variances, and this is all, I think everything we've talked about is a special permit.
Special permit.
But at least in one version of the proposed, it's a lot of waiving of the planning board, and then we also have this special permit site plan that has planning board waiving. So I don't think we can rely on some things without spelling them out clearly.
It's your opinion that we can't rely on the special permit process, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the goals. And so, and I think there's disagreement about that before we debate that. So requiring design standards is the same as standards, whether we agree on them. And maintenance free is kind of how it gets operated, so I'm not sure that's a goal. So can I cross that one out? And a place to age in place is sort of it's not a goal that we're gonna achieve with zoning. Right, that's ownership. And what other things can we incorporate into zoning? This notion of large scale, large scale on large lots or in the LCD. I think that's something that is
So I think a minimum lot size for properties that are more than 40, 50, 60 units is a good idea. And I think we could even agree on maybe a density requirement.
Ron?
Yes. Mary.
So I think that's very important, and I think what other towns have done, again, is you cap it off. You say there's only X amount of senior housing units that are allowed in town, or it's 15% of the total housing units, or there's a limit per year that can be built. So I think having some of that in the zoning is important. Along with the pace of development and distances between if it were large projects.
So get into a little bit of the weeds here, but, you want to kind of just sum that up into.
Yeah, I said
large
cap on
scale.
units. It seems to me that we all want something that's achievable. So and that's kind of a matter of opinion. If we can get something, if it can be more goal oriented, otherwise I feel like it's not. It's hard to measure a zoning bylaw against that.
Can I ask a question about achievable?
Yeah, sure.
Is that achievable to get it approved by town meeting or achievable to actually get things developed in the town?
I don't know, Christina, that was my summary of your, my bad summary of your goal.
Developed.
Developed, okay,
So realistic,
realistic.
is that a better word?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, and that's part of it is like trying to take some lots, figure out where they could go, have some ideas in mind.
Okay, redevelop small scale in independent, that's I think redevelopment to me seems like a really. And maybe the design standards as we think about in residential districts. That we could give the special permit granting authority some authority to have some design
Sure.
review.
Well, I would add to that, the redevelop, that it's, again, there's 5 or 6 things that fall under the senior housing umbrella, so it might just be certain senior housing types can be redeveloped from existing.
Okay, so I think this gives us, oh, go ahead. Can I just comment on Mary's comment about so you're right, the section 2 does define 5 different types of senior housing. And I think the proposed bylaw is a little loose on how we use those terms. So I was gonna ask Sue to look at the law that's referenced in section 2 and see if we should, does that make sense? Or maybe help us to see if the language in the proposed bylaw is consistent with that or maybe we can all do it, but we should pull out the law that is referenced in section 2 to define, because you're right, there are 5 definitions, I think.
I'm not sure, Claire, what you're asking for the law. The
Well,
law
there's the
determines like fair
definitions,
housing and things like
the
that.
definitions reference mass general laws, the definition sections. So we need to know what those are. We need to know what we've defined as senior housing, and then you're right, if we reference independent living in the bylaw or senior housing facility, we just need to know what we're doing, Okay, yeah, go ahead. Sue.
And my hesitation, I'm happy to do that
Yeah.
task. However, it's been my experience that the more detailed you get in your bylaw, you get sort of hemmed in. When you just reference the section, it's more successful in the
No, I did-
long run.
I guess my point was to understand what the section says.
Oh, okay.
That's the only thing.
Okay.
Can I also add another one here, which flexibility, this is a little bit, we want flexible, I think,
Yes.
and creative, as bounded within the special permit, within the bounds of the special permit.
Ron.
Um,
So I guess my interpretation of the word facilities is that it indicates commercial. So I do not believe, in my opinion, that facilities or commercial skilled nursing belong in residential districts. I believe they belong in the general district or an LCD. I think we've talked about maybe something on the other side anyway. Everything independent living. I agree, it could be in a single resident district, but facilities, anything that indicates anything commercial, I think it belongs in that. I'm just, countering what you had mentioned, that you don't belong, they don't think they belong. But I feel like the facilities are going to have those activities and shuttles, and they're gonna provide, and that's what they do. They get people around. Brooksby's isn't, you know, it's in the, on 128, right? So, or Route 1, wherever it's close to. So I think a development like that should be in the LCD. But I wanted to make that point.
I think we actually all agree. I agree that the LCD or a very large parcel is the place for large facilities. Yeah. So
Sorry, I didn't mean
Yeah,
to cut you
that's
off.
right.
Were you done with
That's it.
your
I
thought?
was,
Okay, so this is sort of a more broad goal that I was thinking about today. Because we have, you know, the MBT zoning coming up and, you know, affordable housing, which cannot be age restricted, the MBTA zoning cannot be age
Oh,
restricted. So one of my overall goals with this particular bylaw is to make sure that we're legislating evenly among our various constituencies in town. I think we just have to keep that in mind with how enthusiastic we get with this, that will have an impact on our ability to meet other legal requirements and other goals.
so can I just clarify? So we cannot age restrict. So if it's a senior, if it's a 65 or 55 plus 10 unit, we can't require that 2 of them be income limited.
No, you can't.
You can't.
What was the question?
Can we?
You
But
could.
because, oh,
You
sorry,
could, I'm
no,
sorry, but you could, but you'd have to give, there'd have to be some trade, you'd have to say extra density. You could do, this is a big thing we want with Bobrowski, talking about the, our cluster bylaw.
Yeah.
that-
No, my question is, if you have,
Inclusionary zoning when you do that.
if you have a 55, 10 units of 50, I'm coming to the planning board with 10 units of 55 plus housing.
Yep.
You can't require, the bylaw cannot require me to have 2 affordable,
Correct.
unless I can get 12.
That's
Oh,
not
that's
true.
Yes, it is true, that's inclusionary zoning, Mary, don't say that's not true when you don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, but you do know, that's why.
We
Wow.
went through this with Bobrowski for
No,
weeks.
because I have so if you want to be included in the LIP, you cannot exclude, you can have 55 plus or you can do 62 plus. But you can't then require that everybody else has to be 18 or 19 plus. So they don't want you to exclude family.
Right.
So,
good point,
thank you,
yes.
I appreciate that.
But
So.
Chris, you need to
That's not the
apologize,
issue.
Mary.
No,
No, stop.
Let's
The
talk about
question
this.
is not whether, the question is, can you require a percentage as a matter of course? And what Chris is saying,
And as long as you don't limit ages, you can say at least one has to be 55 or you can do the threshold of 62, but then you can't say everybody else also has to be 18 plus.
You can't say that.
You cannot say that.
Right.
I guess
What's
my,
what's that to do with affordability? I understand your point, but I don't understand the.
so my question is, I'm building 10 units of 55 plus. Can I be required to have 2 of them or 3 of them or 9 of them, whatever it is? Income restricted as a matter of course.
Cluster.
You can do a percentage.
You can't, you have to have a
It's
bonus.
It's
You have to have some-
illegal.
You have to have some bonus.
So if you have a bonus, then you can do it. That's exactly right.
But
So we have to clarify that, what's
the
required.
MBTA is a separate
Yeah.
issue though.
Yes,
Because it does say in those regulations that they can't be age restricted in
Anyway.
order to comply. Now, we have lots of good arguments that I would love to make, but
Promote.
we can't rely on that. So
Right.
as we're thinking about how much of our town area is going to fall under this zoning. We just need to keep that in mind also.
Right, Susan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Can I
go
just-
ahead, Rob.
Sorry, on this reuse.
You reuse
reuse
existing buildings
Isn't there a historic component to that?
if you're in the historic district.
Can't do that, is that correct?
You can't.
Without permission, or
Yeah.
you can?
You can do it with permission from the historical
They
commission.
usually mostly care about
From
the
historical
exterior.
commission,
Yeah.
and so that's only to the historic district, it doesn't, if you have a house that's deemed,
Right,
That's right.
it's not.
unless it's on the National Historic
National
Register or
Register, yeah.
something like that.
Okay.
But we could add that we want to preserve, we could add that, but Susan, you said there, so with the MBTA, and you said some other development couldn't be age restricted. What was that?
No, if I said that, I misspoke. I was just talking about the MBTA zoning,
Okay,
that it does in those regulations.
oh, I thought you said it with the affordable housing development.
no.
Oh, okay.
So in the MBTA zoning district. If I have a building and I want to put 3 units allowed by right. And then if I want to change it to, so the count in the count would be 3. And then if we had a bylaw that allowed me to put 5 senior, it would still count as 3. Right.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the way to understand that.
Okay,
Yeah, so this is a separate thing. It would only count as 3 because that's what's allowed by non-age restricted zoning.
right.
And then,
yes.
okay. Ron?
No,
Okay,
gonna just.
yeah, I was gonna say wrap this up. So I think we actually have some disagreement about at least also some goals to measure our bylaw by, and some interesting, in terms of, we know we want design standards. I think there's agreement that we want large scale senior housing in large lots or LCD, maybe not agreement on large lots, but LCD is where larger scale goes. And we want small scale, not undefined on this page, integrated into the town, and that might be redevelopment and reuse of those are the same thing. And so I will write this up and at least as a guide for the subcommittee to evaluate the
I do have,
wording, yeah.
I do have a request actually about this idea of these facilities being commercial.
Yeah.
They aren't commercial, they're under state law, they're residential, under our own zoning bylaw, they're residential. But I think you're onto something when you talk about commercial being inappropriate for residential districts. And I think if we were able to figure out performance-based, what that means, is it that you can't have common eating facilities for some reason, or because you don't want some kind of traffic? Is there something that we could, instead of just broadly saying we don't want commercial uses, can you say exactly what performance-based things would protect that neighborhood if they were excluded?
So if you're asking me, the residential unit part of any of these, assisted living or senior housing or whatever, for the building code and things like that is considered residential. It's up to towns to designate whether they want to apply assisted living, nursing homes, whatever, to say we consider those commercial or residential, right?
You know,
So we can all agree on that. And then we can all agree that the units where people live are residential. Everything else, if you're gonna have community dining room, barber shop, nurses station, whatever it is, though, that is the commercial part of the entity. So when you start needing 24/7 employees on site, that's one component. It's employee parking. When you're having delivery services, when you need dumpsters, when you need, again, employee parking, all those things for a neighborhood coming in and out, in and out, in and out. that has not been what our residential districts are.
So you, so the performance standard that Chris for commercial. 24-hour staff. Excluding security, staff might be one, just as a what if. I'd like us to ponder that. I think Chris has suggested a good way to parse what's small and what's residential appropriate and what is LCD or large lot appropriate, which is some sort of performance standard, whether it's, I mean, there are lots of places that have dumpsters and other things, so I think it's,
Sorry.
but
Not in
It-
single family resident
Not
districts, and I think that's the thing. I mean, are we really trying to eliminate single family districts? I have no problem with trying to infill, reuse existing buildings with independent living, true independent condos. Like creating and putting something in small neighborhoods isn't appropriate, in my opinion. They belong in different areas.
so let's try to figure out a performance, a criteria.
I don't understand why just commercial, like,
But we allow commercial as an accessory use in every residential district now. We
So,
allow doctor's offices, we allow daycare centers, we allow all kinds of
daycare
things.
centers are allowed by right. That's not.
Yeah, so are doctor's offices.
So we're just, that's what I'm saying. Are we just opening up the floodgates to just eliminate zoning and forget
so
about
this
single
is,
family?
this is at the root of, I'm trying to like get some consensus here. We will disagree on those things. And then I think what we had agreed the last time is that despite our probably some disagreements, we want to put it to the town to see, because we don't speak for the town speaks for the town. So I will type this up and put it to the committee, and hopefully we can at least hammer out some proposals, maybe A, B, to bring back to the group at our next meeting.
So are you including all of those?
Yep, I'll be I will, well, I was gonna group them. So
And I think
feel free to take it.
tag along what Sue was saying, there's only X amount of land in town, and each one of these units are going to add to our inventory. Every 10 that's gonna be built, we're gonna need another affordable, so we need to really think, and I think that's why some of the towns limit how many are built. Because we can't build an
So
affordable.
now we're talking about strategies to implement the goals. So I think in the interest of time, I'm gonna turn this topic back over to Ron.
No, I was saying that it should have a limit.
Right, that's a-
Strategy.
That's an implementation strategy. Is
No, I want it to be in the bylaws, not implementation, it's wording.
Well, I think Ron, if I may, a good idea is trying to get some community surveys out there. What do residents want? So to the point that it's for residents and residents to decide, they should really tell us what they want.
They do that at
Well,
town
if we do
meeting.
that, we're not gonna,
Yeah.
it's. That's the other hand up, you have to.
Yeah. Oh.
Comments.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this in that, Chris made the comment about most, there are a lot of uses that are commercial in residential zones, and I was thinking, I agree with Christine and Mary's comments about, you know, the whole commercialism. You can't really have that in a small situation, but I'm thinking, it all is dependent on scale. So you've got a place like Essex County Club, and Essex County Club has a dining hall, it has a snack bar, it has a pro shop, it has a number of money-making elements. And if one were to have senior housing on even something half the size or land area or a quarter of the land area of Essex County Club, you could have a barber shop, it's one room, or a hair salon or a snack bar or something, and nobody would blink about having those minor uses in a development that's 50 or more units. conversely, I'm hearing more and more that, there's, the Cornerstone Church on School Street, may be selling, and that may be a good opportunity for senior housing. It's walkable, but you may not want to have that level of services in a smaller building. And there may not be parking to accommodate the hairdresser to come in or whatever, but it's all dependent on scale.
Limit commercial use to scale or something, some kind of connection.
Well, I think, it's about economics, right? You may, if you think about the Jack's Barber Shop, Boo Bird, and residential above it. That's a mixed use in a mixed use area that, Jack's Barber Shop clearly doesn't serve just the people who live above, or a person or whomever lives above it. It serves a commercial, so commercial interest. So maybe in
The general.
general district, there's a mix, so. Okay, well, I'll try to, hopefully this will help us.
No, great. Thank you,
Okay,
Sarah.
and then do you want to go to the next ones?
Yeah,
That
and
you-
then we'll talk about schedule after we
Right.
talk about all three.
Okay, so the next one on the list that I put in the packet is the inclusion of family member in addition to employee in the table 4.2 note, 4.2 table and the note number 13, I believe it is. So I can read it, existing note 13, so everybody understands. This is an accessory use in all districts. The accessory use is the accessory use or structure on the same lot with and customarily incidental to a permitted sorry. Correct, scratch that. As part of the existing garage, stable, or other existing structure, family living quarters for currently an employee of the owner occupant. And the proposal is to add for a family member or employee there, and also in note 13, which is again, as part of an existing garage, stable, or other existing structure approved by special permit of the zoning board of appeals. Family living quarters for and to be occupied by only a family member or employee of the owner occupant of dwelling such as garage, stable, or other existing structure approved by the ZBA is an accessory use. Said employer must be employed, said employee must be employed on the premises. And so the proposal here is to add family member because that's what's happening.
So. Understood, and last meeting, there was some question on the legality of that, and Betsy, did you resolve that, or is that something we?
No, I did not talk with Jonathan. I did not talk with legal counsel, but the definition of family in the present bylaw basically says one or more persons occupying a dwelling unit and living as a single housekeeping unit. So there's no discussion of familial relation. So I don't know how that would work on on this bylaw, because from what I can read of the definition of family, you could have anybody move in.
Yeah, we changed that to expressly be that way.
So do we want to move forward that it's okay to do, I would think?
So
Yes, the only thing is in the last sentence on 13, we just might wanna modify that because said employee must be employed on the premises. That obviously doesn't apply to the family member,
right?
so it just, maybe we can make that a
It's a
little
little bit outdated too.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
Sure, we need to have that sentence, I guess.
Christine.
So a few concerns, even about the employee. We don't have anyone confirming that they're employees. We don't have anyone, there's nothing in the rules or the bylaw or the deed that says when the property's sold, and it can be an Airbnb. So without enforcement and safeguards, or if we don't care, then we need to expressly say that without for 5 years, you can Airbnb something. I feel like this is just opening up Airbnbs. So, and the second point, this is my first one, actually. This wasn't discussed, and I feel like we posted something that we actually didn't vote on, so I'm a little concerned about that.
We did vote on this, and we've had two hearings on this, and we voted it. Previous to the last, prior to the last time,
Well,
whenever
of
we,
course we did.
yeah,
But
so.
we
so-
didn't at the last meeting vote to bring this forward. I mean, that was,
It's on the agenda. It's on the agenda for today.
it was posted for a meeting without conversation was my concern. No, we did. I don't believe we did. So I feel like a few people are taking charge of what they personally would like to see with a majority of 5-2, so I am a bit concerned about it. So I think, don't believe it was discussed, and it's a subcommittee that was to talk about senior housing, and now this is on an agenda. And I think it's not on the up and up, in my opinion.
So,
Well, it was on the agenda last meeting, and we started to talk about it, but
it's
it's
not, because Sarah wasn't here.
Exactly.
The subcommittee was created for senior housing.
This is.
right, but this doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't need a subcommittee.
I think
It's
the
been-
issue is that I put it on for the subcommittee to discuss. We
Oh,
can,
oh,
we can
oh.
avoid talking about it at the subcommittee, because I don't think
Got
it needs a
Got
subcommittee.
it,
That's-
okay.
I think that's the objection.
I didn't
Am I
understand
correct?
that, I'm
Correct.
sorry.
We don't need to talk about it at the subcommittee, we got plenty to do.
So,
Ron,
yeah,
thank you. I can't find it because the appendix doesn't match, but anyway, so. I have 6 comments that hopefully we can just get answers to before I would say that it makes sense. What does existing mean? Because that could mean anything. That could mean somebody built a house 3 months ago and then goes to the ZBA to have an employee or a family member.
there is existing,
So
there is existing.
It's existing garage structure.
I think we would have to put a date. So to Christine's point, we don't have any enforcement, so I don't know who is in this spelled out in this bylaw to say who's researching that it's a family member, what does a family member mean? Again, so that just means we're opening up detached existing units to rent. And so we have to be clear that that is what intended or unintended consequences would be with this. And then, yeah, so what the time period is with existing, and then how often is this enforced, right? So again, if it's, a loose term family member, is the enforcement officer making sure every year that that's still a family member, an employee? I don't know how, I don't know how we're enforcing this, so it's hard to say that we would want this. I don't know what the end goal is. I think to say because this is what people do isn't really a good reasoning to add or change a bylaw. I think what we should be doing is saying we need proper language in the bylaw or proper enforcement, not just loosen up the bylaw because people are doing that anyway.
I don't think there's much enforcement going on right now on this stuff. But,
Agreed.
you know,
I'd like to know, this has been out there for a while, and I feel like it's, that what we're hearing is that the ZBA is being told that a family member is an employee. So the ZBA kind of asked us to do this. Certainly, if there are specific suggestions about how to improve this, great, and enforcement is not the planning board's job. And I think we should personally feel like just because we believe or even know or think that something is not being enforced, that should not be a impediment to us taking action. That's a different problem if it exists that somebody else should deal with, because we're not the enforcement agency.
You
So
can put language in enforced by the enforcement officer.
no, that's understood. That's like.
So I guess, I mean, I'm still
Yeah.
not clear, I don't recall the ZBA coming and asking for this, so maybe they could come back and speak to us. I just don't know what the
While ago.
goal is.
Can I just, one more thing?
I can,
Ron, what,
Sure.
we have something from Sarah Melish from a long time ago, but the other thing, just to Christine's point, this on, the minutes of July 24th indicate that we would talk about special permit, it says for ADUs, but that's not accurate, be expanded to include family member as well as employees, so this was decided that we would.
My specific
Anyway,
conversation with the subcommittee.
okay, thanks.
no, I could reconfirm with Sarah Melish
Yeah.
that this is, something that they want to push forward. And I'll do that. So,
Just a couple of points. One, I think it's really a great thing to expand this to include family member because there are, I mean, things are changing with extended families and needing to accommodate elderly parents to come live with you temporarily, or your 20-something child that needs to come in while they're going to graduate school nearby. And if they've already got the structure, the existing structure, I think this is a great way to accommodate families' needs in town. The second point is, of course, the Airbnb thing is always looming out there, but we do have a general bylaw that deals with Airbnbs, and we have to again rely that that's being followed. And I mean, the select board has rules under Article, I know, it's section 20C of Article, I'm not sure, I wrote down X, but I don't know if it's X. So I guess that doesn't concern me so much. Maybe I'm being naive about that, but I think it's time to amend it.
all right, Chris, we haven't heard from you. Any comments?
I guess I would only say, it's being abused now. This is gonna unabuse some of it. It's not gonna fix all of it. I think ultimately, if we ever get a accessory dwelling unit law passed, we could then, as part of that, strike this entirely. But
I agree.
until then, I think we should do something to accommodate, as Sue said, the needs of people in town.
Mary, have you had all your points answered? 6 points or something?
Well, not answered, because again, family, the term family doesn't mean anything in our bylaws. So I think it's a lovely scenario that you paint out, and that's lovely, but that's not what will happen 95% of the time. So I think putting the term family is irrelevant. If we are proposing to open this up to anybody, we should just say people can rent out their garages or sheds or whatever they rent out. I don't know. I don't think people are gonna go and double check what our definition for family is to say, oh, they actually don't mean family, they just mean anybody. So I think if we don't mean true family, we should just take that out and just say, and take employee out and say, you're allowed to rent out your detached
Accessory.
units.
I would be curious from Betsy if we could get, excuse me.
Yeah.
If we could get a distinction of family versus family member, because those might be considered to be different, and then let the ZBA determine whether the application reflects a family member, and leave a little bit to Sue's earlier point, because again, this is what's happening now. And the other thing is that maybe not your 80-year-old mother, but your 27-year-old child is probably willing to live in the garage or the shed with a hot plate and a sink. And so this kind of maybe gets at some of those hot plate sink situations, which are going on frequently. And are depending on your perspective, legal or illegal.
Safe or
Meeting the
unsafe,
rules or
yeah.
not meeting the rules, depending on, but I think to date, there are certainly, extra sinks with extra countertops that have people living in them, and that is not an ADU or not but it's a family, a collection of people who live in one dwelling with common living facilities. So it's not perfect, but I agree that the ADU bylaw is probably the place to fix this, but I think we don't have the time or stomach for that right now.
So, and I would do a,
Christina?
So my recollection of what Sarah brought to us several years ago was a maximum of 2 instances that this was happening. So my question is, what's the problem we're trying to fix? This got approved and she turned a blind eye, it got approved. So if it was 2 instances, why are we changing a bylaw to include family members that's not going to be enforced? At this point, we have a ZBA process, there was a contract. I've gone back and looked at those 2 instances. They provided an employment contract. The case is, I mean, just because Sarah didn't think it was a legitimate contract or a legitimate employee, plenty of people want to, for purposes, to employ a mother, a cousin, whoever, to take care of their family member. I mean, that happens. I don't think, so if Sarah has a problem with that particular situation, how are they gonna go down the slippery slope and then determine who is just a family member? Like, if she had a problem with saying this is an employee that's a family member, where are we gonna drive a line for just a family member? I think it's wide open.
Let me circle back with Sarah and get some kind of clarity on that, and I'll take all your points to her and see what she says, and I'll get a defined answer. In the meantime, I think, Betsy, are we pursuing any more on this legality issue, or are we good on this?
I didn't have the full language, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send Jonathan Murray the language that was on SharePoint and a definition of family from the bylaw, and ask him indicate what the goal of this change is and see what he thinks.
Right. Nancy, do you have the old definition of family that we had?
I can look in an old bylaw. I have the 2017
oh,
bylaw.
We did, we changed our definition of family.
we had family in this.
I don't think we had family in the.
No, we're not anything anywhere.
So there's a couple of steps here, so, this will, when we get to talk the schedule, we'll bring this up. So, are we good on talking about this for now?
Excellent.
You're going to the floodplain? Warren? So, next up is the floodplain bylaw, so, Betsy, you've done some research here, you've talked to, KP Law and, Eric Carlson.
So let me explain what I've done.
With a bunch of.
Originally, my thinking was that because the floodplain maps were going to be changed in December of 2023 or January 2024, that we would do the floodplain bylaw in spring town meeting, annual town meeting 2024. And Mary stepped up and said that she thought that it should happen earlier than that. So I ended up talking with, I took part of the state's model draft. Mark Bobrowski had a draft. And then I added some comments to that. There have been basically 3 iterations. There was the original iteration, which I then sent to KP Law and to Eric Carlson, who's the reviewing agent at the state. They came back with comments, and then I ended up making modifications to those to take into account their comments, I also took into account about half of Mary Foley's comments regarding what you can do in a velocity zone. I did not cut the definitions because neither legal counsel or Eric Carlson felt that there needed to be a cut of definitions. I added, I basically tried to address everybody's concerns. Mary's not totally, but I think in this most recent draft, I've tried to address as many concerns as I could. So the draft that's on SharePoint has gone back to Eric Carlson and to KP Law for review. KP Law in the initial document had very few comments, and Eric Carlson had 5 comments.
Yeah, so I see, you're not listing all these maps. You can just say to refer to them. That's good. We don't have to change that. But, as you go through this document, I have some questions on what's written here. I don't know how to incorporate them or talk about them or how we want to go forward with them, but there's a few things. I mean, I guess they're kind of minor, but the flood administrator is the building inspector. Is that?
So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's an issue that Mary has as well. In a number of communities, it's the conservation agent. In a number of communities, it's the town planner. Other communities, it's the building inspector. The town of Manchester by the Sea is about to lose their conservation agent. She is retiring. She will be leaving the end of September. Her job is not advertised anywhere. And there's a ton of conservation agents advertised for various other communities. So I think you will be, and also what's being proposed is that the conservation agent who presently works 29 hours is being cut to 20 hours, and that position will be shared with Hamilton for 20 hours. So I did talk with Chris Bertoni, who is the departing conservation agent, and she said the person who's the conservation agent's not going to be able to do their job, let alone take on being the floodplain coordinator. So then most communities have the building inspector because they're dealing with the flood codes and they're dealing with the structural issues and the foundation issues and things like that. So I think it makes more sense to have the building inspector as opposed to the conservation agent, the town planner, or the town administrator being the conservation,
What about
the
the town
floodplain
engineer?
coordinator.
About the town engineer? Is that a
Yeah,
possibility?
I think it makes much more sense to have the building inspector.
Okay, so I had a bunch of comments on this, and I don't know, go ahead.
I have sort of overarching question, and as I was looking through the draft that was sent to KP Law, I saw Jonathan Murray's comment, which did bring up the question, if this bylaw needs to be updated in the spring, is there a particular urgency for amending this fall? And that is the question I have. I'm wondering what the urgency is that we want to get it done this fall.
I agree with, yeah,
That was
that's a good point. I agree with that. I kind of, as I went through this, I've got some confusion. Are we allowed building in zone BE? Are we not? I mean, it's listed in 2 different sections. What's the definition of above grade? Permits, permanently towable light duty truck, some definitions. Variance means a grant of relief by a community. I don't know what that means. You know, any repair that exceeds 50% of market value, how is that determined? So I had a bunch of questions on this, so I don't know if the board really needs to be able to push this forward at this point in time. I don't know, Gary, you've got some comments also.
So the reason I said it was important is, you know, we're pushing all these other bylaws, and with the MBTA housing potentially coming up, the state came out in 2022, has to be 2020, with the model floodplain bylaw, and they had 3 sets of criteria to implement this. One was that you had somebody from FEMA come and analyze the community. One was you were redoing your bylaws anyway. The third one, and you know, I forget the exact scenario, but it was basically, or do it as soon as possible. So now we're 3+ years out of compliance. And, you know, with all our climate resiliency task force and grants, and again, additional proposed development, I thought it was very important to get a floodplain bylaw in place. I can't say I've been thrilled to date with the process because I don't know who gave the go-ahead to give it to the state to review, to give it to KP Law to review
I think Betsy did that on her own, and I think it's her right to.
before the board had a time to flush out some of these
Well,
things, so
that's-
you
that's
wouldn't.
why I'm wondering if there's urgency on this.
So you wouldn't have to do the back and forth, and we could talk about who should be the floodplain administrator, all that type of thing. So I think it's been a disjointed process that we need to clean up. You know, I guess it's along the same lines of, you know, people abuse a bylaw, so why not just approve the bylaw? It's the same thing as we're already out of compliance. If the rationale by most of the board is,
Well, here's
Let's be
my
out of
point. If we
compliance
do it for
longer.
April, and we get it right, you know, it's just time to get it right. We still, you know, let's say it gets passed in April town meeting, that gives 3 months, Attorney General rules on it. So it's in place ahead of any MBTA's zoning. May, June, July, we still have time. And we have a better, and we've had a flushed out bylaw that kind of, if we go to town meeting with something that's kind of wishy-washy without good definitions, we get eaten up. I've seen that before, so we need to be, I think we need to have this thing nailed down with, I've seen some issues, and I think the board needs to discuss them.
and I agree with all of that. I guess I would disagree that perhaps that it's the town planner's right to just move a bylaw along without board review. Let me finish.
Okay.
I will continue to say, I think we need a good, solid floodplain bylaw as soon as possible. If the majority of the board disagrees with that, so be it. But I don't think it's in a good format to bring to town meeting, so I've done all that I can at this point.
Betsy?
I don't think it's a disjointed process. This is what the state expects, that there's gonna be some back and forth between the community and the state about the review. Neither the legal counsel or the state had any issue with the definitions. We added one definition. The whole reason I pushed it forward is there was an insistence to try to see if we could get it for fall town meeting. That's it.
That's from the board, Sarah?
I think it would be really helpful to have a in public information meeting on this topic. Why it's important, what the requirements are, and why they're important. And then the sort of a high level, sort of a PowerPoint or something, maybe Eric comes and does it for us, that says, here's what the state recommends. I don't know if they're recommendations or requirements. That would be important to me. and have the public understand the sort of the context and then what this bylaw says as a layperson's understanding, so people walk out and said, I know why it's needed, or at least I've been told why it's needed. I know what's in it, what's proposed in it, and here's how it, this impacts people's properties. For sure, if you have a vacant lot in the VE zone and you can't build a residential structure, your value of your property has diminished significantly, for example. So that may be the way life is in with climate change, and I don't dispute that, but I think we're missing a step. We've got a draft that's been reviewed by, and I don't have a problem with the process. Thank you, Betsy, for moving this forward. But I think we need to now have a primer on this for us and for the public, not as a bylaw, but as a presentation. So maybe either Betsy could do that, or Eric could come and talk with us about this issue, so we understand it as an issue. And then are in a better position to evaluate the bylaw itself. And I think that that would be great to happen next meeting. If we can get, if there's an expert who can come and do that, then it would help me understand, and also by having Eric or whomever come virtually, it would help us understand what our obligations are too. And talk about this, and maybe we'd have the MBTA zoning group come, because this is definitely a intersection of some of that area. And then I guess lastly, it might be useful to take a hard look at some of the properties and how this would actually impact.
The maps are, the maps
But
are
we have-
ready.
We know roughly what the maps are.
Right,
So,
there-
but that's probably a
there's
secondary
public
thing.
input period starting next week, right, Betsy?
Right.
And anyway,
I think we need a primer. I need a primer.
It's a great idea.
okay.
Okay, I can try to arrange for that.
Well, I don't know if everybody agrees, maybe everybody else. is
Yeah,
more up to
let's
speed.
go around the board. Chris, any comments on this?
Yeah, I think Sarah's got a good idea. I'm kind of ignorant about this. What the requirements are and why we're doing this, so I think it'd be very helpful.
Christina, any comments?
No, I think it's a great idea.
Sue?
That's
Magdalene and Mary? On this idea of a primer
It's a primer.
public session.
Just a information session, so we come up to speed on
Primer? Primer.
a meeting.
I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, all the data's online, but we need somebody to come and speak. That's fine.
Okay, well, there were some definitions. I think, I don't know if he should be coming next meeting.
For whatever.
because I don't think Chris will be here anyway. And second off, I think we need to kind of look through this.
So I guess my only comment on this is that based on the state criteria, for us to be pushing things that aren't urgent, like if we say, what's the urgency with the floodplain? I don't know what the urgency of some of these other things are too. So if those aren't urgent and this isn't urgent, then maybe we should just not bring anything to fall meeting.
So that segues into what I wanted to talk about lastly is the schedule, and if we can, where we stand here after all this discussion. Betsy, you had your hand up, did you wanna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the most pressing issue, whether it's for this fall or next spring, is who is going to be the floodplain coordinator, because two of the most logical people, the conservation agent who's getting hours cut and is going to be split between two communities, and the building inspector is supposedly has a full plate, and that's another
Talk to him about this,
5 hours a week. I've sent him copies of it. I haven't gotten.
commented on any of that?
Well, I don't know, just in my personal opinion, I don't know if we talked to the building inspector. I think we need to talk to Greg. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we need to go to the source. So, I mean, and then we talked to need to the select board, because they're the ones who authorized the change of hours. So that's what my question to Betsy was going to be. Have you communicated to the select board the importance of this position and the additional time
Well,
this is going to take, and someone's hours probably need to be bumped up, not down?
yeah, I don't know why
What's
we're
the way
talking.
it
We don't have one.
We don't have any-
I've conveyed this bylaw to the conservation agent, the conservation chair, the building inspector, Greg. I think I might have included Ann Harrison and basically said, you know, it's gonna require some more enforcement and we need a floodplain coordinator.
So let's discuss this amongst the board too, on what we want to do here.
I'd be curious to know from Jonathan or whomever, if the floodplain coordinator could be appointed by a planning board. And that way it would give us the opportunity as, over time, as staff changes, people who have, obviously we do it in consultation with the town administrator, but then it takes off the table who today should be the floodplain administrator, because to me, that seems to me to be a very immediate problem that changes. So it seems that we could designate that person with a hearing and change it as needed if we did something like that.
Well, that's a
That-
good point. That could be for discussion when we talk about
Right.
this.
I'd be curious, I mean, it seems like it doesn't seem to me that the administrators should be a sticking
All right,
point.
let's start with Christina and then I'll come back to this side. And then we'll-
So I have a question for you, Betsy. So in your thought process, decision-making process to pick the building inspector, can you tell me why, pros and cons? Yourself, Concom, building inspector, could it be someone appointed from the town? Could we pay someone independently? Could we be someone on the planning board? Like, what other creative ideas can we think of? Because I don't think the building inspector is the greatest choice for this town. I just think he's overwhelmed.
It could be a consultant that gets hired, under 4453G to review all the floodplain applications.
But I guess going back
I
to the
just,
beginning.
from my experience, from 40 years of experience doing this, it's either been the conservation agent, the building inspector, because the building inspector has to deal with all the building code issues for floodplain, or occasionally it's been the town planner. So it's
I guess,
generally.
how did you get to the decision of the building inspector? Like the pros and cons, like how did you get there? I mean, that's your experience.
How I
right?
got there was that the conservation agent's hours are being cut by a third, and the new agent is gonna have to get up to speed, so you're not gonna have really an operative agent until the end of the year if you're lucky. As I understand it, there's several resumes for the town planner. Again, anybody taking the position is not really going to be up to speed for a little while on that. The building inspector has been here since 2004, 2005, knows the lay of the land, and understands that the building code when it comes to building in a floodplain area. So
My final follow-up is, I wasn't thinking the 53G money. I was just thinking a private subcontractor because there's no specific project, because we need a coordinator. Is that a possibility? Are there consultants out there that just? we
I've
would have to
I've
reach
never
in?
heard of a planning board member or a non-employee being the floodplain coordinator.
I think we're a little off topic on this. We can discuss this when we talk about the floodplain line, on which direction we want to go. And I'm not averse to having the town engineer do it.
I think that's great. Because that's full-time employment.
Got a license.
And we have a few of them.
So anything else on this? So, all right, so I wanted to talk, Betsy, and this is the last item here on the agenda. I know we were trying to be an hour, but the schedule, you had set a schedule that we needed to have a public hearing next meeting obviously that's not gonna happen. And I don't know if we're ready yet for any of these currently. So how does that impact the schedule on getting things on a possible town meeting in November?
So, before Greg left on vacation, he said if there's a need for a special town meeting in the fall, that there would likely be one, and it would either be the first or the second Monday in November.
So
So,
I don't think we wanna have one just for our stuff.
Yeah.
In my opinion, but
But I agree,
I
that was
agree.
one question I was gonna ask is, what would the other things be on the agenda? Because that, to me, that's a huge factor in determining how many or any do we wanna put forward.
and I don't think we're.
But
I was told by the town clerk that Greg had not spoken with her about scheduling a fall town meeting. So I did try to, get Greg to give me a definitive, and he did not, but he said if there was a need for a fall town meeting, it would be the first or second week in November. So based on that date, I backed up all the time period that basically he said that he would need final language by the first week in October.
That's what I was thinking.
So theoretically, we could advertise
Give us a
for,
month.
if this is ready, we could, any of it's ready, we could advertise for right after Labor Day and have a meeting the end of the last meeting in September, and then have a special meeting on October 2nd, and then hand over the language.
But we don't wanna be the only thing on the agenda, the
Right.
reason the town.
Right,
meeting
we
is
don't
called.
wanna,
Yeah.
we don't wanna, and it's nice to get some of these things off of our checklist, so we
Right.
don't have an avalanche in April of
Right,
stuff.
I'll actually, to clarify Sue's point, make a motion that we are not asking, that we do not ask for a town meeting just for zoning. That we would be that we would pony on to, or whatever, add to a existing warrant rather than be a warrant standing alone for zoning.
I second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Right, just to
Unanimous.
clarify.
So,
So you're saying October 2nd as a public hearing, Betsy? That makes sense to me. Or the 9th.
yeah, public hearing of what, though? We haven't decided.
Well, we have 2 meetings to firm it up.
So what I suggested is if we advertise after Labor Day, it would be the last meeting in September, and then a special meeting on October 2nd.
What's the special meeting for?
In the event that you don't have reconciliation at the last meeting in September.
So we'll get public
Still-
input and then we may.
I don't understand
I mean,
why do we need a month, Betsy, between?
Language this.
We have to advertise the public hearing. It takes 3+ weeks to advertise the public meeting. Then we have the public hearing, comments, it gets sent to legal counsel for final review. Greg has to have the language the first week in October. And then the warrant is put together, and then the town meeting is in early November.
Well,
That's
for
the
3 weeks of
schedule.
advertising, we're already into October anyway.
It doesn't look doable to me. Unless we, rush something to the public, which is something,
floodplain doesn't look doable to me, just because we haven't had a first.
yeah, all
but I
right, so
think-
that's an easy, let's talk about the low hanging.
Right.
Let's vote to take the floodplain. I make a motion that we don't move the floodplain forward at this time.
can I amend that motion, that we don't move it forward to a fall town meeting, but that we do continue to move the bylaw forward?
Absolutely, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
Okay, I second that
I-
motion.
All those in favor? Against?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay.
2 abstains?
Yeah.
5-2.
4-2,
4-2.
4-0-2.
402, Gail, which is around. Okay, so the next sort of fruit is the,
Let's see what we can get to senior housing for our next meeting.
okay, so you guys are meeting on.
Thursday at 3:00.
So let's see what comes out of that.
Yep.
I can send you a few comments I
Great.
had.
Please do.
Is that okay?
Send it to the group, please. Yeah, I,
How are we gonna send it? Who do I send it to?
Send it to Chris, Mary, and me.
well, that's.
We are, Betsy.
But I just, just rattle out your comments right now. We'll just listen, and then they will have been in public and.
Well, I don't know if I can just rattle, I'll try to rattle. Definition C, section 2, what does that mean?
Okay.
Lot coverage and impervious, building height, this shall not preclude the conversion and renovation of existing structures, just wanted to know what that meant. The maximum lot size of all buildings, including accessory buildings and impervious surfaces, shall conform. Wanted to know what that meant. The maximum number of parking spaces are required in sections just may be altered by special permit. Town services, where available, town facilities shall be serviced by public water. This should be coordinated with the DPW, possibly. Planning board shall consult with fire chief, chief of police, or any other entity for safety. Minimum setbacks for all property lines of such parking areas, dumpster locations, and loading areas shall be 15 feet, or can the planning board, relieve that requirement in special case? Is it a possibility? Talked about who determines what buildings merit preservation.
You can, once you just read them to us, then they're in public, we can have them for our committee.
Only gonna get 3 pages, right? Well, I have, here it is, accessories, uses and words at the sole discretion of the planning board, the operator of the senior, this is senior housing. So what we're talking about here?
It is right.
At the sole discretion of the planning board, should we say planning board and all these, or should we say SPGA? That was my question,
Okay,
because it may not always be the planning. And
It'd be easier
that's
to
kind of consistent throughout.
okay. Thank you. Now you can give them to us so we can go over them again,
You want this?
please.
Okay, they're kind of messy.
Sorry, messy. I can see, I'll scan them.
Okay, so on moving things forward, I'm gonna talk to Melish on the, on your language change, and Betsy's gonna talk about legality. So I don't know if we wanna move that forward.
Seems to me we have a couple of questions and we can vote it up or down
Okay.
once we hear that from. That seems to me
Well,
pretty
yeah,
easy,
so we
right?
can discuss that at our next meeting. Okay, anybody have anything else?
I have one item. I ran into Mark Glovsky on Thursday, I guess it was, and he met with the building inspector, his team met with the building inspector, and apparently the cell signaling technologies project it's likely it requires a variance to building height, the way the building height is calculated, and apparently the parking garage triggers this. So in all likelihood, there's going to be a several month delay while they try to figure out how to resolve it.
So that allows, some freedom going forward for us towards the end of the year. For our meetings to do other things. So if you have something, ideas. Move forward on, we will have some time in
Take
October.
vacation. How about a vacation?
Well, this was
Oh, we
supposed
could,
to be the
give us some
vacation.
time to really understand the
The
floodplain.
floodplain, right, right.
Okay, we'll move on the floodplain, that'll slot in
Yeah.
nicely, okay.
I would also suggest that when we have somebody come talk about the floodplain, that we invite the task force.
That'd be great.
I think,
How about
it's,
just the chairs?
why not? invite-
Or the whole thing?
And the Concom or
Well,
whomever,
people can put tune in, they don't have to actually
Yeah.
be here.
Okay,
right,
that's true.
Concom might be interested too.
Yeah, I would think the Concom would be very
Well,
interesting.
when's our meeting with them in September?
Oh, yeah, Betsy was coming.
So meeting with the task force. So I guess we went back and looked at where this was needed, that we need to meet with the task force, and nobody has found that exact language that we need.
I
to
can
meet.
send it to you.
You have
Can you tell us where it is? Because
It's in an email
an email,
Email.
oh,
that does to the state,
an email to the state from whom?
the interim town planner. Because the form wasn't fully filled out. Want me to send it to you, Ron?
I'm not sure that's necessarily binding on anything, but I do have
Do
something to say
we
about
need to
this.
meet, do we, so we have two members on the task force. What's the purpose of the meeting with them? I mean, what are we gonna gain? Because they're,
My opinion. So I didn't fill out the form, so I think the state was looking for what is the open communication between the planning board and the task force working in conjunction and the public outreach in that process. So with the boards meeting every month, we're getting the data, we're each getting the data, we're doing the back and forth, making sure that the timeline is moving along as, it's a check-in. I mean, you could ask Betsy, she's the one that filled it out. I see from Susan's face, she might not agree with that. She
well, I'm
meets
just wondering
monthly,
what
but-
we gain. We have two members on the task force that can report back to us, and we can take messages back and forth, but I'm thinking of just on the board's time.
So, but I'm just saying, you just said we had probably time in September, so it would be a
We
good
do.
opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen any data, so
Well,
I
my
don't
thought
know.
is maybe we do introduce ourselves with the board. That's a good idea in September, and then maybe we have as needed basis to meet with the task force, something like that, when there's something comes up that we wanna transmit or they wanna transmit.
That's just what I was gonna suggest. To meet it once a month is just going to bog down both our meetings.
It's
We
in
have
an
too
email,
much to
so
do
she
in the
filled
task
out-
force.
So, if there was a communication to the state about a monthly meeting, I'd suggest that we send an email just amending that to say the task force will meet with planning board as needed, not on a monthly basis. If there's some, I can't imagine that they would. If it's. They care about the outcome, not about the process.
Yeah.
Betsy, did you generate that email and can you amend it? Is that what the board desires to do?
Yeah, just an email to them and say. We're meeting on a regular, as needed, we have two members. This crossover, we'll get a periodic updates.
That's it. Comments? Yeah, I'll do.
No, you're not on mute. She's still there.
Betsy,
Yeah,
can you do that?
no, I didn't.
No, can you do that?
Can I do what?
Amend what you wrote to the state that about meeting monthly with the task force, that we will meet on an as needed basis
I
Okay.
don't recall this email that Mary's referring to. There was no documentation that said there was going to be meeting in the application. And there was somebody from the state who contacted me to ask for clarification. I do not recall saying that the task force and the planning board was going to be meeting monthly.
Mary has, maybe can send you the email and then we can
Send
clarify.
an email and then we'll amend it. Really don't.
I have a.
Dana?
I've heard, just briefly listened to a few meetings here and there. And I think it's, just goes to this issue a little bit. Chris, I think you're on the Affordable Housing Trust and I'm getting a little frustrated, concerned about land transfers happening last minute. So the conversation about, taking a portion of Powder House, not coming up at all to the planning board where this would be in our purview. So I would like some more information on that as a planning board member.
So I can tell you that no one has proposed any land transfers with the Affordable Housing Trust in Powder House. It's not come before the trust.
It was the, housing authority.
So you were at that
It was
meeting, though,
open
right?
space and housing.
No?
No one is, I don't know anything about Housing Authority, maybe something. with
Okay.
Housing Authority.
So I guess,
If that happens, we need to approve that.
so I would like to be part of the conversation, not I think the planning board needs to be part of the conversation on these things from the get-go. Like, we should be kept in the loop, told what's going on. I mean, that's conserved space, talking about it. I mean, it's not insignificant.
Betsy, you know anything about this land transfer? Powder House?
At
Bill?
Powder House, no. Nobody,
So they
I don't know.
talked about,
Who's they?
it was, I think this particular conversation was at an open space committee. They talked about, taking some land that abuts Powder House and the affordable housing, Newport Park, and putting housing there and then trading that land that's in conservation for land that we would obtain in Western Woods. If you take
I-
land out of conservation, you have to get equal or greater value somewhere else. And so they said that we could get some land in the Western Woods.
My understanding is that at an open space meeting, Helen Bethel ended up making reference to a potential land swap. And what I stated to her is that if you do a land swap, if the land is in a restriction, you have to go to the state legislature to get it out of restriction. And that's the last I heard of it.
So it sounds like nothing's happening.
This was a comment that was made by one open space committee member, Helen Bethel.
Well, no, they discussed it at the meeting.
It was on the agenda.
Who's our open space liaison?
Hope it's not me.
I have the minutes.
Okay, Sarah's
So
got
the
that.
minutes of the June 21st meeting.
No, this was
No,
just
this
a
was like
couple
last
weeks
week.
ago.
Okay, this is what I could find. So regarding the Newport Park right-of-way situation, whatever that is, a letter is to be drafted on behalf of the select board, reviewed by the town administrator and sent to MHA.
That's about parking.
There was a
So-
small discussion of the potential for MHA to build more units on the site and potentially to complete a land swap with restricted land. It was believed that the Concom would require. So that's the minutes, that's the work I searched for swap. Their minutes. So maybe that's not it, but that
So
is.
Newport Park has some issues in that the buildings were not built in the right location and they were built on an easement to the town. And it's never been resolved. And so there's a lot of stuff going on at Newport Park that needs to get resolved with the select board and Greg and the executive director of the Housing Authority and the Housing Authority. But my recollection is that Helen Bethel brought up the issue of that Newport Park, that the housing authority wanted to build more units and maybe they could do a land swap. But that's all I recall of it, and it kind of didn't go too far.
I think it's been still talking 2 months later, so. I guess, Ron, I mean, who can we get more information and just, I wanna be kept in the loop. We shouldn't have to go look through minutes, I think. Anything involving land, our approval down the road, we
So
should be
this
kept in
is
the loop.
being, this is the open space committee?
Maybe it's the housing authority.
I think it's,
I think it is the housing authority about it.
Well, I drafted a
Oh,
letter,
okay.
for Greg to sign to, or the select board to sign to the housing authority about this whole easement issue. But to my knowledge, the issue of building and land swap and whatever was clearly Helen Bethel, and that was it. Nobody else has made a comment on it.
Is there legality issues? Okay, I think, I'll follow up with the open space committee. I'll see who the liaison was. And I will do that, and I will talk to Sarah Melish. You'll talk to the housing
Sure, I
authority.
can talk about it.
One last thing, we had,
Minutes.
Gail put minutes of August 13th in our packets. I
14th.
looked at 14th. Any movement to accept?
Abstain.
I move to accept.
There a second? I would say. All those, any comments? All those in favor? Like 3 of us?
Yep.
You were in favor?
I wasn't here.
Okay. 3 of us, you 2 are in favor of the minutes?
I
4,
didn't even-
4 to 1.
4 to 0 2. Right?
Four
She
to-
abstained.
You're out on the minute voting.
I didn't get a chance to.
There, I vote yes.
Okay, anything else anyone wants to bring up? Otherwise, have a great, Labor Day, everyone, as this unfortunately summer comes to a close. We'll meet September 11th, day in infamy. Move to adjourn.
So moved.
All those-
Second.
All those in favor? See you in September. Bye bye.